Good evening, folks. My name is Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. We watch Canadian federal politics right here. We try to show things in context. A lot of people miss things that happen outside of question period. I have the time, and I guess it's kind of my job to watch everything that goes on Parliament Hill, like all the press conferences, all the committee meetings, what goes on the House of Commons floor all day. We cover that because they don't show it on the news. And the news just takes some clip and makes a story out of it. We show it in context here so you can make up your own mind. Whoops, there. I guess I'm tired. I started it on the wrong screen. Anyhow, we're going to get into it. My name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe. Smash that subscribe, and let's see what kind of crowd we can gather tonight. We've got a bunch of great things that happened in the House of Commons today. We're going to get into that. Let's go. In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups. The globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
Thank you very much, Mike. You see I'm armed with all our ambassadorial corps. Hi, Bob Hormat's there. Fantastic to see you. I saw Bob Rubin. Saw Bob Rubin on the way in here, who taught me. Bob taught me everything about foreign relations. Bob Rubin taught me how to make decisions under uncertainty. Unfortunately, those two are coming together at the same time. I would do my best, and I'm looking forward to the discussion, your questions and counsel. What I propose to do in 10 minutes is just to say a few words about how a middle power like Canada can deal with the situation where the rules-based order is eroding, great power rivalries intensifying, and authoritarian models are hardening. I mean, that's a simplified version of what's going on. And I'll start by admitting up front that we prospered under the old system. We would like the old system back. Could we have the old system back? Is that going to happen? We prospered under the old system, and we were able to pursue a values-based foreign policy based on or anchored on a rules-based multilateral trading system, an open global financial system. We had collective security anchored in NATO. Our geography, which hasn't changed, but the facts around the geography have changed. We had enviable geography. It gave us privileged access to the world's largest and most dynamic economy, and it distanced us from the major state and non-state threats. We also subscribed to an expectation that perhaps in the past at the Council for Foreign Relations, it was also the case for some, an expectation that non-market authoritarian countries would converge over time through engagement to free markets, open societies, and even democratic values. And this meant, for a country with a values-based foreign policy, that our engagement with those countries could be justified by the expectation of progress. In fact, the very engagement helped with that progress. And alignment of values was merely delayed, not compromised. So, a few things have changed. Certainly that convergence of values has proved elusive. The economic strategy of the United States has clearly changed from the support for the multilateral system to a more transactional and managed bilateral trade and investment approach. Global power is moving. You can debate how much or how far this will go from American hegemony to great power rivalry. And technological change is shrinking that geographic advantage that we had and expanding the fields of conflict from the virtual to the extraterrestrial. All of this is reducing, I can't have to observe this during UN week, reducing the effectiveness of our multilateral institutions from the WTO to the UN, on which middle powers like Canada have greatly relied. So what do we do about it? And I'm going to give you a punchline, which is we think we can thrive and I choose that word advisedly, thrive in this new non-system, or the system that's evolving, for three reasons. And the first is we have what the world wants. Take on the energy side, we are an energy superpower. That is going to become increasingly evident. 85% of our energy is clean. We're one of the world's largest LNG exporters, one of the largest reserves of oil and gas. We measure additions to our grid in 10 gigawatt chunks, to put it in perspective, and you will see that with time. We are top 5 in 10 of the world's most important critical minerals. 40% of the world's listed mining companies are in Canada, to give a perspective there. We are a leading developer of AI, and our research universities are some of the biggest producers in volume of AI, computing, and quantum talent in the world. Unfortunately, most of them go to the United States. I understand you're changing your visa policy here, so you're going to hang on to a few of those. We have capital. Our pension funds are some of, if not the most sophisticated infrastructure investors in the world, with all due respect to Larry Fink. And our government, we were talking about him earlier. I have lots of respect for Larry Fink, I should say that. And we have a government that still has fiscal capacity to act decisively at a moment when governments need to act decisively. Now, the second reason why I'd say we have good prospects, not assured prospects, but good prospects, is we have values to which much of the world, not all of the world, much of the world still aspires. We're a pluralistic society that works. Our cities are amongst the most diverse in the world. Public square is loud, diverse, and free. We, by the nature of our federation, we have to practice collaboration and partnership, and it's a country that is still committed to sustainability. The third reason why I'm going to argue we can thrive in this time is we recognize what's going on. This is not a transition, this is a rupture. This is a sharp change in a short period of time, driven by a variety of factors. We have a determination to rise up and meet this. And I'm going to give you one last set of threes, and then we'll have our conversation. Our response to this is to build strength at home, to build resilience by diversifying abroad, and pursue a variable geography to defend our values and pursue our interests. So just on strength at home, I can understand if you were distracted by events down here and you haven't followed exactly everything we've been doing in the last 4 months. But while you were otherwise occupied, we've cut tax incomes and capital gains. We have removed all barriers to interprovincial trade. We have passed landmark legislation to fast track literally hundreds of billions of dollars of projects in energy, in AI, in critical minerals, in new trade corridors. We are doubling our defense spending by 2030. Our core capabilities with respect to defense, AI, quantum, cyber, critical minerals, provide unique opportunities for dual use and economic benefit, and we intend to fully exploit those. We are diversifying our trading relationships and our security partnerships. We signed the most comprehensive agreement with the European Union from a non-European Union member, the Economic and Security Partnership with the EU. We signed that at the end of June. We're working on fleshing that out now. We are on track, I should choose my words more diplomatically, we are on track to be a full member of SAFE, the European Defence Arrangement, which allows us to diversify and accelerate our defence procurement. This week, what day is Monday? Last week, yes. Seemed to miss the weekend in the middle, but we agreed a comprehensive approach within the context of USMCA, but a comprehensive approach with Mexico to deepen our bilateral trading relationships, and we are pursuing more aggressive strategies throughout Asia. My last of my threes is around that variable geography. I'll just give a couple of examples of where we're active. The Coalition of the Willing for Ukraine, we are the largest contributor on a per capita basis to Ukraine. Okay. And we, well, I won't go into more detail. We can talk about Ukraine if you wish. When you think about our Arctic sovereignty, that we are cooperating very closely with the Nordic Baltic 8 for physical protection up there, economic development, and also defending NATO's western flank. We are active with like-minded parties in efforts to promote a two-state solution and Middle East peace. Easiest, not the easiest thing to do, I know. And I'll make one other point on critical minerals. We, out of the G7, are forming buyers clubs for critical minerals so that the world can diversify away from Chinese dominance from them. So it's not just the supply, but it's having that secure access to capital or an offtake, basically, so these can be developed. And I'll just say a word before I finish that having chaired the G7 this year, I came into government 6 weeks before it was there, so we didn't have Mike Froman. We had a very good Sherpa, but we didn't have Mike Froman, so we had a lot of work to do. It was a very interesting, and this is a variable geometry support point. When we had 2 days, the first day, core G7, focused on a variety of issues, very productive. President Trump was there for that day. And these were good meetings. These were good discussions, a good meeting. There was progress made. Not everything landed, but it's never the case that everything lands. It was fairly narrowly focused, though, on economics. With Iran thrown in, there's always a crisis, Iran thrown in as well. The next day, with the leaders of most of the BRICS countries, some of the largest emerging economies, Australia as well, not an emerging economy, but others like those, the focus was on what this room would recognize as old multilateralism, global commons, where we're cooperating on energy, what we can do to actually develop on critical minerals. Financing for development. What's going to happen at COP? Lula was there as well. That doesn't mean that's the way the world's working. I'm not naive about that, but there is a substantial proportion of the world that focuses on these issues. A country like Canada is one of them, and it's one that we will. It's something we will continue to do because it comes back into our strengths. Look, I'll sum up. I would ask you to, when you think about Canada, actually that's my request, think about Canada. As a strong, sovereign, independent nation, think about Canada as that. But there is a big opportunity in this shifting in Canada. We understand what's going on. We understand the scale of the response that's required. We have the resources the world needs. We have the talent to turn that potential into growth. We're a reliable partner. We're connected more than anyone else through trading relationships with any other part of the world. And we're no longer relying on just the strength of our values, but the value of our strength with your help. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
So that clown has another 15 minutes in an interview. I'm not watching that. Like, he just spoke for 15 minutes, didn't say a word. How about we get into some people that use their words articulately, get to the point, and they're effective communicators. We're going to take a peek here. This is Shannon Stubbs.
Time is up. Resuming debate. Piece of debate.
She's no joke.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will split my time with the new great member for Terra Nova, the Peninsulas. In 2023, the Liberals imposed yet another step in their anti-Canadian energy agenda. An oil and gas emissions cap they touted as the first and only kind in the world, designed to limit Canadian oil and gas production that will really cap and kill Canadian jobs, businesses, private sector, clean tech, and revenue for all levels of government to provide programs and services Canadians value. Its true intent to limit production of Canadian oil and gas specifically is clear in the words of the current Prime Minister, who was a senior economic and energy advisor to the then Prime Minister Trudeau when he announced it. The current Prime Minister, of course, said, quote, "As much as half of proven oil reserves need to stay in the ground." The Liberals, 20 months and 3 weeks ago, said the Canadian oil and gas cap was, quote, bold climate leadership, but common sense Conservatives saw it for what it was, an unprecedented, arbitrary production cap, the only one of its kind in the entire world, self-harm to Canada by our own federal government. That's right, and let me be extra clear about it. No other country, and importantly, no major oil or gas producing country, has imposed an absolute cap federally on its own production. Not the United States, Canada's biggest energy customer and competitor because of the last anti-development Liberal decade that killed at least 4 Canadian pipelines, dozens of LNG projects, turned the world away from Canada and drove hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions in major projects out of our country. Not Norway, not Saudi Arabia, not a single OPEC nation made up of hostile anti-freedom regimes with lower and often non-existent environmental and human rights standards. Now, even though the current Prime Minister is another Liberal, he suddenly claims to want to make Canada an energy superpower and put shovels in the ground on major projects at unimaginable speeds not seen before in generations. But how can Canada be an energy superpower when this Liberal government blocks Canadian energy production and exports with their own laws and policies that are all still on the books? How can Canada lead when the Liberals decided to impose a policy that interferes in provincial jurisdiction, that experts, proponents, and Indigenous entrepreneurs all say will kill major projects and thousands of jobs? The layer of the Canadian oil and gas cap on top of other anti-energy laws and policies block the very projects that would create Canadian jobs, reduce emissions, and get Canadian oil and gas out to allies and to global markets. The last lost Liberal decade of domestic policy attacks on Canadian energy has put Canada in a vulnerable, dependent position that was totally preventable. Canada, of course, still sells up to 90% of our oil and gas to the United States at steep discounts because the Liberals killed 2 potential export pipelines outright, one to the West Coast to access growing Asian markets in the most direct, affordable, and safest route, and one west to east pipeline that would have ensured Canadian self-sufficiency with Western oil for Eastern refineries and more competition for customers with exports to Europe. At the same time, both Democrat and Republican administrations turbocharged the American production and exports of their oil and LNG, turned themselves into a leading global supplier, actually the world's leading global supplier, while the Liberals, while watching all this happen, increased their stranglehold on Canadian oil and gas and workers every single step. Various experts estimate those discounts cost Canadians big, about $25 billion every year. Just imagine what infrastructure programs or services that could provide right now and could have contributed during the last decade to benefit Canadians everywhere if the Liberals hadn't spent the last decade killing active private sector pipeline proposals to ensure no new ones would be proposed. The truth is the Liberals announced the Canadian oil and gas cap publicly with little consultation and economic analysis in advance. The Prime Minister was even in another country when he imposed it. The Liberal NDP Bloc coalition at the time did a short study on it at committee, but Conservatives had to dissent in order to properly highlight the cautions about the wide-ranging and catastrophic impacts of the Canadian oil and gas cap. Witnesses during that committee work did warn them. Dale Swampy of the National Coalition of Chiefs said the government, quote, treats the oil and gas sector like they're the enemy and a problem to be fixed, and that, quote, a cap.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it, man.
A cap on emissions will be, in effect, a cap on production, which kills economic reconciliation opportunities for Indigenous communities and businesses who need it most. The Liberals were warned the cap will harm Indigenous, rural and remote communities the worst, but they didn't care, even though Canadian oil and gas developers spend about $14 billion through procurement from 585 Indigenous-affiliated vendors across 110 municipalities and 45 Indigenous communities. That's real money that makes a real difference for Indigenous people, all threatened by the revenue and job-killing Canadian oil and gas cap. Since then, the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer reports the Liberals' oil and gas cap will kill 54,000 jobs by 2032. So that's almost double the population of the Alberta-Saskatchewan border city of Lloydminster. There are hundreds more cities like that across Canada. That number of jobs to be lost in 6 years because of this cap, a cut of $21 billion from Canada's GDP. The cap will shrink Alberta's GDP by 4.5% and the rest of Canada's economy by 1%. It'll cause $191 billion in lost activity in Alberta and $91 billion in the rest of Canada. So why should this matter to Canadians in every part of the country? Well, here's why. Because the oil and gas sector contributes 7.7% of Canada's GDP. It's still Canada's top export, despite the damage they've done. Over $208 billion every year is what it contributes to Canada's GDP, with $166 billion from direct activity and $42.8 billion from the supply chain. It supports over 446,000 direct and indirect jobs, more than 10,800 Indigenous jobs. Nearly 900,000 Canadians depend on the sector through spin-off or induced job creation. These are also not easily replaceable minimum wage jobs, since the average compensation for an oil and gas worker is nearly twice the national average for goods-producing sectors. Now, Alberta employs 54% of the supply chain workers, but BC, Ontario, and Quebec together account for over a third of those jobs. That means this cap threatens jobs, paychecks, and government revenue from Vancouver to Montreal and everywhere where oil and gas is produced, from Fort St. John to St. John's and St. John. The Conference Board of Canada warns that between 2030 and 2040, the cap could reduce Canada's GDP by up to $1 trillion and strip $151 billion in federal revenues, money that could go to defense or border security, to fight crime or federal programs, and shared with provinces to build hospitals, schools, roads, and provide social services. Proponents across Canada agree the cap is bad policy and disadvantages Canadian businesses and jobs, since growing Canadian oil and gas production and exports is the solution to ensure Canadian energy security and to help lower emissions globally. The Liberals were warned, quote, "This could lead to greater global emissions as we see more coal being utilized than natural gas and sources of supply coming from jurisdictions that don't have Canada's high standards." You know, world-class oil and gas operators across Canada point out their ongoing aggressive reductions in both absolute and emissions intensity that, by the way, the Liberals' oil and gas censorship bill precludes them from talking about. And that cap could also have the opposite impact its proponents claim, by driving more projects and investment out of Canada and, quote, bring all that action to a halt. The truth remains today that the oil and gas sector, among private sector developers, invests the most annually in clean tech and emissions reductions technology, more than all other sectors in Canada combined. So warnings that the cap will do exactly what the Prime Minister said he wanted, keep oil and gas in the ground, kill businesses, jobs, and government revenue, but will also not even achieve environmental outcomes its proponents claim, well, that should be heeded. The Liberal oil and gas emissions cap is a production cap. The former Environment Minister also admitted that oil and gas production falls under provincial jurisdiction, so this cap also inflames already divided provincial governments and sparks legal challenges, more uncertainty that drives away investment. And while Canada caps production, of course the world is passing Canada by because the Liberals have let them. The EU has signed a $750 billion deal for American energy, and other countries have been forced to sign deals with hostile authoritarian regimes for LNG after these Liberals spent 10 years saying there's no business case. So the Conservative motion today is very clear. We are the only party fighting to repeal this job-killing, economy-killing, emissions reductions-killing cap, full stop. Canadians cannot afford another lost Liberal decade. So the motion is clear. Repeal the cap. Unleash Canadian energy to make a strong, united Canada self-reliant.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, part of the problem for the member opposite is that I was actually here for part of the years of Stephen Harper when he was the Prime Minister and back in 2015. And if we were to be honest, what we would say is that Stephen Harper couldn't even build an inch of pipeline to our coastlines. When she talks about the east-west pipeline proposal, that is something that the economics determined that. That's the reason why Harper couldn't do it. It actually took a different administration to get the Trans Mountain built. It had nothing to do with the Conservatives. Where the Conservatives might get credit is on propaganda, misinformation, and so forth. The question I have for the member is, does she not believe it's a good thing when you got Ottawa and the provinces, in particular of Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, working closer together to ensure that we can build big projects?
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Well, it sure is an indictment of his own government and him sitting here, at least for the last decade since I've been elected, that he's just admitted that the federal government hasn't been working with provincial governments cooperatively over the last 10 years. And instead, today, a consequence of the Liberal government is more division in provinces and people pit against each other than ever before. What a shame. Of course, the truth is that under the former Conservative government, 4 pipelines were built, and all of the private sector proposals for both the LNG project and the pipelines that these guys outright killed. The former Prime Minister vetoed the Northern Gateway pipeline, and these guys interfered in the regulatory process deliberately to put a pin in the west to east pipeline so Canada could not be energy self-sufficient and to have more customers. They're the ones that have a track record of killing pipelines. That's who they truly are, and Conservatives are the only party that has been consistent on behalf of oil and gas workers in every corner of this country.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. Le député de Repentigny.
The member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, we've seen some backtracking in the environment since the arrival of the new Prime Minister on the carbon tax, electric vehicles, greenhouse gas emissions reductions throughout the country, and now we're feeling this backtracking on the cap for the oil and gas cap in the country. Clearly, we're basically looking at climate skepticism here. I wonder if my Conservative colleague, I wonder what she thinks of climate change. Is that an established scientific fact?
You know, I certainly couldn't begin to tell the member how Canadians are supposed to decipher the last decade of uncertainty and current uncertainty that these Liberals are causing. He raises a great point for voters in every single part of the country who voted for these Liberals based on their concerns and their support of anti-energy and anti-development policies that the government has imposed over the last 10 years. So the people in this place who have to answer for why they're baiting and switching and flipping and flopping and can stand here shamelessly and take positions that are diametrically opposed to those that they defended for a decade, including just 6 months ago, they're the people who have to answer to Canadians about what their views are and what they're going to achieve.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray-Cold Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Lakeland, just to the south of me, for that very passionate speech defending people that work in the energy industry. Because, as she very rightly pointed out, a cap on emissions is a cap on production, which will hurt creating jobs. And so I was just wondering if she could explain why there is so many concerns being raised of people in our ridings and throughout Canada about the constant attack from the Liberals. And while they might appear like they might possibly change their opinions in what they're saying with words, we've seen no actual action. So I was just wondering if she could give her feelings on that.
Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Well, I thank the member for her question and for her comments and for being such a great representative and advocate for the people in her riding, which make an outsized economic contribution to the entire country and directly help contribute to programs and services that are delivered in every province across Canada. I couldn't begin to explain the thinking of these Liberals or the damage that they've done to their own credibility. But But what really dismays me after 10 years is all of the lost opportunities, and that they did deliberately and that they were warned of. The hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs right across Canada because of this anti-energy policies is unconscionable.
Order. It is my
member for Calgary, Midnapore.
All right, gang. So we switched over there. Shannon was done. That's Shannon Stubbs. She's a wicked cowgirl from Alberta. Up next, we've got Stephanie Kusi here. She's amazing too. Another great MP from Alberta. Thank you very much, Sandy Tipper. Appreciate it. Let's watch Stephanie go. She breaks the fourth wall. She looks at the camera all the time. It's fun.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's always a pleasure for me to rise in this House on behalf of the people of Calgary, Midnapore.
In this House, on behalf of the good people of Calgary, Midnapore. Madam Speaker, the motion that we have before us today is that the House call on the Prime Minister to immediately repeal the oil and gas emissions cap, which is in effect a production cap. Now, Mr. Speaker, we are standing here today talking about the emissions cap, but what we're really talking about isn't just the emissions cap. We are talking about the future of a nation. So, Madam Speaker, here, failure is not an option. Failure is not an option because hundreds of thousands of jobs are on the line. Failure is not an option because seniors are starving and are going to food banks. They're on fixed incomes. They don't know where they're going to find their next meal. Failure is not an option because we have record youth unemployment. This is an epidemic in our country.
Thank you very much, Lost Art. Thank you, Mary. I don't want to interrupt here too much. Stephanie Kusi's great.
Failure is not an option because housing costs are through the roof. And failure is not an option because investment is fleeing this country. So, because when we're talking about the emissions cap, we're talking about the obstacles that this government created for over a decade, obstacles that prevented Canada from becoming a prosperous nation, a nation today that has created a system of dependence and a culture of desperation. One that could have been avoided by investing in our natural resources sector. The Prime Minister won his mandate for one reason, and one reason only. Canadians, for better or for worse, put their trust in him to do what he said he was going to do, build a prosperous Canada. Now, we gracefully supported C5 in the spring. We want to see this government succeed in their major projects. We did everything we could to give license to this government. We wanted to give the Prime Minister everything he needed to begin these major projects, to fulfill his promise to Canadians. Yet, we have yet to see one new project announced and one shovel in the ground. Relative to today's motion, we have yet to see him commit to taking the first steps to achieving these major projects, of which eliminating the production cap is only one step. We have offered the following suggestions to him and the Liberal government several times, on which they refuse to act. Repeal C-69. Repeal C-48. And C-69, as you remember, is the No More Pipelines, the bill that prohibits any type of infrastructure, genuine infrastructure, being built in this country that allows for our prosperity. C-48, the No More Tankers ban that does not permit Canada to export its natural resources abroad. Eliminate the industrial carbon tax. This government likes to say that they have eliminated the carbon tax. We know that this isn't true. There is still the industrial carbon tax that exists, and this is another step that the Prime Minister needs to take, in addition to finally immediately repealing the oil and gas emissions cap. So until the government takes these steps, they have yet to prove to us, the official opposition, and to Canadians, that they are serious. That they are serious about digging us out of this hole that they created and restoring the lives and the quality of life to Canadians. Because Canadians are suffering. This government just received an F from Food Banks Canada on food security. An F. You can't get a worse grade than an F. Canadians earning less than $75,000 are spending 57.3% on groceries, utilities, and transportation. Food inflation is rising 70% faster than the government's inflation target. For all of these reasons, Canadians are suffering. For all of these reasons, the Prime Minister needs to keep his promise of restoring Canada's prosperity. What hope has the Prime Minister given the official opposition? What hope has the Prime Minister given Canadians? Well, his record before he arrived in the House of Commons is not encouraging. And we all know the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So let's take a look at the past behavior of the Prime Minister. When asked by the leader of the official opposition at Industry Committee if he supported Justin Trudeau's decision to veto the Northern Gateway pipeline, the Prime Minister replied, "Given both the environmental and commercial reasons, I think it's the right decision." Interesting. Sounds like a 180 compared to his position today. Then, just 6 months later, at COP26, the Prime Minister also said, "We have both far, far too many fossil fuels in the world, and as much as half of oil reserves, proven oil reserves, need to stay in the ground." These words from a Prime Minister who is trying to convince us that he wants to restore the promise of Canada, restore the prosperity of Canada. How can Canadians be encouraged by these words or believe his sincerity to do something? Let's look at his record since he got here. Also an indicator that his actions match his words. Everyone knows the right thing to do when you're preparing to do something is to under-promise and over-deliver. Well, let's see if this Prime Minister has in fact done this. This is the most basic of lessons for anyone, whether it's in Dale Carnegie or for school children. It's you under-promise and over-deliver. All major projects that have been announced to date were projects that were previously announced. No oil pipeline made that list of major projects. Without introducing a budget, the Prime Minister has doubled the deficit, which is expected to be the largest non-pandemic budget in Canadian history, giving us the fastest shrinking economy in the G7 after he promised the fastest growth, home building dropping like a rock, where he promised to double home building, and a record $54 billion that has fled the country in investment. The Prime Minister won the election on his message of elbows up, that he was the person to handle Donald Trump with threats of tariffs and annexation. But today, the tariffs remain in place, with 50% on steel, on aluminum, and 25% on autos. And can I point out the obvious fact? There is no trade deal signed. For all of these reasons, we must question his sincerity and his ability to deliver on what he said that he would do. The next thing we have to look at is the team that the Prime Minister has surrounded himself with.
Here we go.
We look at the present Minister of Culture and Canadian Identity, who stated, COP28 calls for groundbreaking goals to triple renewable energy, double energy efficiency, and for the first time ever, we reached a historic consensus to move away from fossil fuels in energy systems. He also went on to say, the atmosphere and our climate certainly don't need them, and many of us believe we cannot build pipelines and meet our international climate commitments at the same time. And with the world working around the clock to avoid the worst effects of climate change, it makes no sense from an ethical and moral perspective to produce and ship more of a substance that is causing problems that disrupts the future of our children and our grandchildren. This from a close minister to the Prime Minister. In addition,
All right, gang, we're going to flip it again. We're going to check out, this is a very short one. This is Carney, another guy from Alberta, man. There's a bunch of MPs that I like watching from Alberta. But Ginu gets into it here with Hogan. So we're going to take a peek at that.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Speaker, the approach of this Prime Minister on energy issues is much the same as the approach of Justin Trudeau, which is to feign interest in energy development and at the same time to pile on barriers that make it effectively very difficult, if not impossible, for projects to move forward. The member asked what our plan would be. When Conservatives were in government, we had major pipeline projects move forward. We had a fifth, the Northern Gateway project, approved, and the government passed Bill C-48, which was designed to kill that project. They piled additional regulations never seen before on any project on the Energy East pipeline, designed to prevent that project from going forward. And then they acted surprised when the private sector pulled back in response to the additional burden that the government imposed. So, Mr. Speaker, isn't this just more of the same Liberal approach to energy, which is to feign interest, but to pile on things like a production cap that makes it nearly impossible to move forward?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So glad to have the opportunity to talk about Northern Gateway, which I noted came up in the opposition House Leader's remarks. The fact of the matter is that was a project that was rejected by the courts for failing to meet an environmental and consultation standard. And that, as a result, is why that pipeline ended up declining.
Questions, comments? Time for a brief question. Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, 20 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, the Trudeau Liberals, very much the same as these Liberals, passed Bill C-48, which was explicitly designed to block pipelines from going to northern BC. Would he have supported Bill C-48 had he been in the House at that time?
Parliamentary Secretary, 20 seconds.
Yes, I think so.
Resuming debate. Resuming debate.
All right. What are we going to check out this time? Let's check out, this is Finance Committee. So committees go on all the time. They're investigating issues. They're a little more face-to-face than things that happen on the floor of the House of Commons. Here we're gonna view Jasraj Halan. He's the Finance Shadow Minister. He's real sharp as well. Another MP from Alberta. Check it out.
And Mr. Halan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So in dealing with the committee business that we have put forward, we have a few items. We know that C4 is still continuing on. It is a reminder that the Ways and Means has been passed, so there's nothing holding back the tax cut from happening. It's already happened because the Ways and Means motion was passed for housing and the consumer carbon tax, which thanks to the Conservatives and the pressure, it has been taken off for Canadians. So while we're collaborating here and in the spirit of collaboration, I'd like to bring forward a motion that incorporates both C4 so that we can get that passed out of this committee, and also another really pressing issue that's taken up a lot of not just resources out of Canada, but also it's very concerning the alarming rate that it's increasing. So I'll read the motion. So it's a long, and we'll email it to the clerk. That the committee undertake a study of Bill C4, an act to make life more affordable for Canadians, and for the purposes of this study, A, the committee invite the following witnesses to appear for 1 hour each on separate panels. 1, the Minister of Finance and National Revenue as the sponsor of the bill. 2, the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure in relation to Part 2. and 3, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change in relation to Part 3, and that each minister appear for 1 hour on separate panels and be permitted to be accompanied by departmental staff. B, the chair be permitted to schedule a meeting for clause-by-clause consideration of the bill only after all of the ministers listed above have appeared as requested. C, the committee invite additional stakeholders it deems appropriate and hold a minimum of 2 meetings to receive their testimony. And D, immediately following the conclusion of this study and once the bill has been reported back to the House, the committee undertake a subsequent study on the use of offshore tax havens, given that Canada's weak rules on offshore subsidiaries, tax treaties, and limited enforcement by the Canada Revenue Agency have made our country both a conduit and a destination for tax avoidance, costing taxpayers billions of dollars in lost revenue each year and inviting white-collar crime into Canada. And that, for the purposes of this study, the committee hold no fewer than 6 meetings and invite the following witnesses. 1, officials from the Department of Finance. 2, officials from the Canada Revenue Agency. 3, the Parliamentary Budget Officer. 4, representatives from law enforcement agencies with expertise in financial crimes. 5, tax policy experts. And 6, any other witnesses the committee deems relevant. The conference, and that's the motion that I'd like to put forward. The reason why this is important, the Conference Board of Canada estimates tax evasion and avoidance costs the federal government $8.9 billion to $47.8 billion each year. Tax fairness advocates and even CRA whistleblowers have raised concerns that Canada's weak rules on offshore subsidiaries, tax treaties, and limited enforcement by CRA have made our country both a conduit and a destination for tax avoidance. We've seen the Liberal crime wave and weak enforcement of anti-money laundering rules that don't help either. We've had officials testify at this committee that even though they catch the people either money laundering or committing these crimes, but the enforcement is not there. And not only that, this ties into the fact that the Liberals have dragged their feet for 2 years on the review for the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act as well, even though 2 years ago, then Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland wrote to this committee to have that review done, as well as the Bank Act, which needs to be updated. Crime is getting more and more sophisticated, and with the Liberals dragging their feet on this important review, that sophistication of crime, Canada cannot keep up. The officials do not have the tools and are not able to keep up with what we need. But more importantly, the enforcement of it, the rules, the fines, the update on the criminal code needs to be done so that those that are committing these crimes, they get punished for them. As these are big numbers, $8.9 billion to $47.8 billion each year that gets costs. Canada still hasn't prosecuted anyone for their involvement in the Panama or Paradise Papers either. And that ties into the fact on the Liberals' soft on crime policies that won't punish those that are avoiding tax, evading tax, or committing these crimes.
All right, gang, we're going to flip into something else now. More committee. They're always interesting, but let's take a peek at John Barlow, another MP from Alberta that stands out. He'll be asking questions in this one, I believe.
Thank you very much, and I think that was well under 5 minutes. So I'll turn to Mr. Barlow first for 6 minutes. We're going to do a 6-minute round. Mr. Barlow.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the officials for being here. I know this is a quick turnaround, but I think all of you understand how important this issue is and get a bit of an update, especially when we see the financial situation Canadian farmers are facing with the numbers that were released last year, that the total farm operating expenses rose almost 3% to $78 billion in 2024. But for the second consecutive year, we saw operating expenses up 28.6%, and producers are taking on more debt. Farm debt rose 14% in 2024, the largest increase since 1981. So margins are already tight. and when we have limited at market for canola with these additional tariffs, that's making those margins even that much more difficult. So to Mr. Mayor, Mr. Smith from Global Affairs, I know that on November 20th, the former agriculture minister flew to China to address this matter. Can you tell me who the minister met with on the Chinese government side?
Mr. Chair, if I might, I think I may be in a position to respond. It is, in fact, the case the minister did travel to China in November of 2025 and to participate in meetings of the Canada-China Business Council. But to my recollection, there were no formal engagements with representatives of the Chinese government.
Thank you. Earlier this summer, another former Minister of Agriculture, now the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, was also went to China. Did he have an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Agriculture from the government of China or any elected officials on that trip?
Mr. Chair, I'm not specifically aware of the full itinerary of the Parliamentary Secretary and the Premier of Saskatchewan. My understanding, though, is that they did have opportunities to meet with representatives of the government of China, but I'm not certain which ones.
Thank you. So it seems that we're having some difficulties. We want to try to address this tariff issue, get this resolved, that the current government is having some difficulty getting meetings with high-level officials with their Chinese counterparts, which is a problem. Again, maybe Mr. Rosser, you can answer this. Are there plans for the Prime Minister or the Canadian Minister of Agriculture to travel to Beijing to meet with their Chinese counterparts, and have those meetings been arranged?
Perhaps we'll turn to colleagues at Global Affairs. I'm not aware of the minister having specific plans to travel to China at this time, but their high-level engagement does occur regularly with Chinese officials through the embassy in Beijing, through the JETSI meeting that took place a couple of weeks ago. So there is regular ongoing engagement with senior levels of the Chinese government.
Okay, and thank you, Chair, for the question. Yes, I can also confirm that with respect to the Ministry of International Trade, that he has engaged with his interlocutor. There have, of course, been other senior level discussions, including with the Prime Minister, with Premier Lee, for example. And so there are possibilities that there will be further engagement as we go through to the fall. But I can't confirm at this point in time those meetings being scheduled. But I would say that there are engagements at all levels.
That's what I need. Thank you. On the most recent trip with Premier Moe and the Parliamentary Secretary, are you aware of any rationale or decisions by the Chinese on these tariffs, and what would it take to get those eliminated? Was anything spelled out in terms of what steps, the rationale for why these tariffs were put on, and what needs to happen for them to be removed? Specifics, if they have them, please.
I should preface by saying I have received no briefing on that trip beyond what's been reported in media, and I know Premier Moe has been talking about the importance of continuous and ongoing engagement with China.
Thank you, Chair. I can say that there was an opportunity for Premier Moe as well as for the Parliamentary Secretary to reiterate Canada's concerns with a variety of different Chinese measures impacting Canadian exporters, including from the agriculture and agri-food sector. The Chinese did use the opportunity to articulate some of their concerns with respect to actions undertaken by the Canadian government, but these are clearly well known and something that is part of an ongoing dialogue with them.
Thank you. I only have time for maybe one more question here, but the canola growers had said quite strongly that the assistance offered by the Liberal government isn't enough, and I quote that canola farmers can't borrow their way out of this crisis. Are there any? This looks like this could be a long-term issue and ongoing as farmers get ready to plan for next season's crop. What other assistance is the Liberal government planning to assist canola farmers if this tariff issue goes long-term?
Minister MacDonald is in regular ongoing engagement with the canola sector. Indeed, the Prime Minister held a roundtable with them last week. The initial programs announced September 5th were meant to be part of a broader solution. One element of that is continuous engagement with China with a view to trying to seek relief from the tariff situation. But dialogue continues, and we'll continue to discuss with the canola growers and other affected stakeholders what measures they might need to support them if should the situation persist.
Thank you. In conclusion, I would just hope that this government was able to get high-level meetings with their Chinese counterparts to get this resolved. These trips that are going over there with no results and no meetings are not consequential and not effective. So I'm hoping that's something that will be changed in the very near future.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. And I'll go to Mr. Connors for 6 minutes.
All right, gang. Now we're going to flip into our last video of the evening. This is an MP from Atlantic Canada, a Conservative, a lady. Carol Anstey is an MP from Newfoundland and Labrador. She has the perfect degree of Newfoundlandese accent. She's awesome. She's new to the House, so I don't know this woman very well yet, but she has caught my eye a couple of times. She seems real sharp. Let's take a peek. This is Carol Anstey from Newfoundland.
Mrs. Anstey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask some questions around an industry that is extremely important to the province that I come from in Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's the offshore oil and gas sector. Given that we have a new government with new objectives, I want to discuss more specifically how this sector relates to trade diversification, but also within that context, the impact that the emissions cap has on investor certainty. Firstly, given the Prime Minister's clear mandate to diversify Canada's trade and the fact that the offshore oil in Newfoundland and Labrador is one of the few resources with direct access to tidewater, I'm just curious if the witnesses might agree or disagree that this sector could be an important part of the Prime Minister's mandate.
Certainly, thank you. I can start, and if my colleague wants to add. Certainly, the government has recognized the importance of Canada leveraging its energy resources to be an energy superpower in both conventional and clean energies, and is committed to leveraging that advantage that we have. In terms of the emissions cap, which you mentioned, indeed, draft regulations for that were published back in fall 2024. We received significant feedback from provinces and territories and stakeholders on this proposal, and so we are considering the way forward based on all of that. Certainly, the cap is not meant to be a cap on production. It's only meant to be on emissions, and so the draft regulations were carefully designed to ensure that they would not have a significant impact on the potential growth of the sector.
Thank you. Interesting that you point out about it not being a cap on production, because industry reports a 60% drop in offshore capital spending since 2016, 0 exploration wells in 2025. So it's interesting that you would say there's no cap on production when currently we're seeing that there is a big drop. So I'm just curious how you square that with the regulatory framework, and wondering what your position is with respect to this potentially causing a negative impact on that industry.
I can only really speak to the Environment Canada role, which is really limited to that regulatory function. So I can't speak to what other factors might be that are affecting investment in the offshore sector. But again, I would just say that we did receive significant feedback from provinces and from industry, and so are taking that into consideration in determining the way forward on this particular proposal.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the cap is not in place at this point in time.
And again, just to this point, once again, other offshore jurisdictions like Norway and Brazil are attracting billions in new investment. Now, the government has introduced this new legislation, Bill C5, the National Projects List, which, you know, our understanding of it all is that it's clearly designed to streamline major infrastructure projects and to reduce the regulatory burden. Can you acknowledge that this legislation was intended to address the regulatory hurdles that, you know, currently are driving this investment from places like Newfoundland and Labrador into other areas like Norway and Brazil? What's your position on that?
1 minute to go.
I can't speak to the extent to which, you know, any changes in investment patterns may be directly due to regulatory suite, but certainly Bill C5 is intended to streamline regulatory processes so that rather than a project having to seek approvals from many departments, they are combined in one document and provided upfront, subject to conditions that would be then enforced by individual departments.
So given that it's streamlined, then it would acknowledge that up until this point, the regulatory burden would have caused delays and bottlenecks.
I can't pronounce myself on that cause and effect.
Currently, there are media reports, and the industry is watching this very closely, that there might be some walking back on the proposed oil and gas emissions cap and replacing it with some investment-based measures. So do you feel that this policy that you referred to earlier would have been an effective policy, or can you just speak to that, given that we're hearing some rumblings that they may be walking back on this?
Thank you. A short answer, please.
I would just say that certainly it's always important to consider a range of policy measures in terms of emissions reductions. Oil and gas is the highest emitting sector in the Canadian economy, and some subsectors are growing. So certainly one we need to continue to focus on.
Thank you, Mrs. Nichols. Monsieur Saint.
Thank you very much, and I think that was...
All right, gang. So this is the last thing that we're going to watch. Today it was really funny when Michelle Rempel-Garner got to ask our simpleton immigration minister, Lena Diab. She's from Halifax here. She's an embarrassment. She used to be my MP before I moved back to where I live now. She is a mess, and she gets train wrecked by Michelle Rempel-Garner. Is hysterical.
Since the minister was appointed, many more people have been abused and defrauded by Canadian immigration consultants who contribute to the chaos in Canada's immigration system while the minister just lets them. Instead of taking advice experts have been giving for years, which is to make immigration consultants report to lawyers, the minister said, "This is fine," this summer, and doubled down on a system that is clearly not working. The Prime Minister chose an incompetent minister to sit in one of the most important files in government. Why?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Prime Minister for choosing me to be the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Very proud of my record when I served as Nova Scotia's Minister of Immigration. Protecting prospective newcomers from those who try to take advantage of them is critically important, and that is why we've established the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants to regulate consultants and protect the public, and this is something that we are very serious about, and we will ensure that it gets done.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The minister mentioned her record as immigration minister in a provincial government. During that time, a Nova Scotia auditor found that there were the following issues: no process to determine provincial labour market needs and assess whether those were being addressed by Nova Scotia's provincial nominee program, and none of the 8 recommendations from a 2020 fraud risk assessment had been implemented. So I'll ask the same question. Why did the Prime Minister put an incompetent minister into this position?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to thank the Prime Minister. In fact, I want to thank the people in Halifax West for electing me to this Parliament. I am here to do the best job I possibly can do with my experience, with my expertise, and with my love for Canada and love for Canadians. And we will continue to do that. As for my record as Minister of Immigration from 2013 to 2021, provincially, the record is clear. I would invite parliamentarians to go look at it. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Richmond Hill South.
After 10 years of this Liberal government, our immigration system is in chaos.
All right, gang, we're wrapping up right there. My name's Aaron. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We cover the question periods live. We do a little pre-show with a couple of interesting videos like you just saw before the question period. And then we slip right into question period so we don't have the boring statements that go on all of the other channels and whatever. Again, thank you all so much for watching. My name's Aaron. This is Canadian Loony. The channel's Loony. My name's Aaron. I don't mind being called Loony. It's close enough to the truth. Truer than anything you're ever going to hear in the House of Commons. Thank you guys for watching. We're out for now.
Oral questions.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
WTF.
Hey, everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am.
Really pretty there already.
You know I am. I am Canadian. Come on! I love this country where I am. This land is where I make my stand. No other gets through the one we call Canadians.
But let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
All right, elbows up.
Elbows up.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Loony. We have issues in Canada, right? Unless you're completely head in the sand, be aware.